Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're exploring something that really gets to the heart of faith and imitation. I want to start with a beautiful metaphor from the source material we're looking at today. It's a story the poet Saadi tells.
Ah, yes, the story of the fragrant earth. It's such a perfect entry point.
It really is. He describes picking up this handful of soil, just ordinary earth, but it had this incredible smell of roses.
A completely overpowering fragrance.
Exactly. So he asks the soil, how did you get this scent? This isn't your nature. And the soil gives this simple, profound reply. I sat beneath a rose tree.
It's all about influence, about proximity, not about inherent nature.
Precisely. And that introduces our topic perfectly. The source we're diving into today is from a 1994 lecture by Mustafa Uslamalulu titled Three Muhammads, Two Conceptions and One Truth.
And the central idea is that the Prophet Muhammad, who is meant to be that rose tree, the Uswatun Hasana, or beautiful example, well, we've often been smelling the soil instead.
We're smelling the interpretation, the reflection, the influence, but not the source itself.
And the lecturer makes a very bold claim here. He says that while we think there's only one Prophet Muhammad, the community has sort of inadvertently created three different figures.
Three? That's a huge claim.
It is. He argues that two major theological streams, the traditionalists, or Muhaddisler, and the mystics, the Sufler, have each presented a distorted, incomplete picture.
And these two pictures clash with the third one.
The third one, which he argues is the authentic, balanced, and truly imitable model presented by the Quran itself.
So our mission in this deep dive is to really unpack those first two models, see where the distortions are, and then hopefully arrive at that third integrated truth. This isn't just academic, right? This is about finding a blueprint we can actually use.
It's entirely practical. It's about recovering the usable model from the layers of interpretation.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with that first model, the one that is probably the most dominant and recognized in the Muslim world today.
We begin with what the source calls the Muhammad of the traditionalists. This is the version that, as the lecture puts it, the majority of the community recognizes.
And if we had to label this model, its core identity is
What?
the prophet of speech.
Of speech.
Exactly. This is a portrayal where words are absolutely primary. He's seen as constantly speaking, commanding, forbidding, giving opinions on literally every single subject imaginable.
So the entire framework is built around his verbal output.
Yes, which is directly tied to the methodology, because the word hadith itself literally means speech or report. So the very tool they use predisposes them to focus on the words.
Now, I imagine this isn't a critique of the hadith themselves, but more about how that massive body of work is, sometimes understood or applied.
That's the key distinction. The source isn't attacking the traditions. It's critiquing the picture that emerges when you strip them of context. The sheer volume. We're talking about reports that number in the hundreds of thousands, even over 1 million.
And the subtle implication of that volume is, the implication is that he must have been talking all the time. The lecturer asks, a bit rhetorically, if he didn't talk constantly, how could 1.2 million hadiths exist?
Right. It creates this image of a man who did nothing but talk. And if that's the focus, then his actions, his silence, his internal life, all of that just fades into the background.
It becomes secondary, almost invisible. And this is where the critique of context becomes so critical.
Why is that lack of context so destructive to the model?
Because context is what grounds a statement in reality. The source argues that so many of these reports tell you what he said, but not where he said it, when he said it, or, most importantly, what he was doing at the time.
So a specific piece of advice for a specific person in a specific situation
gets abstracted, becomes a universal, timeless, context-free law that just, as the lecturer puts it, fell out of the sky. And that makes real imitation incredibly difficult. You're left with a list of rules, not a living pattern of behavior.
And this then directly impacts how leadership is perceived today. If that's your model, what kind of leaders do you produce?
You produce leaders who replicate the model. They become people who sit in their chairs and constantly talk, command, and forbid. They feel they have to have an opinion on everything, and that silence is a sign of weakness or ignorance.
They become the thinkers.
Exactly. They fall into this trap of seeing themselves as the thinkers, while the followers, the students, the community, their job is just to be the doers, the ones who live it out.
This sounds dangerously close to that really sharp analogy the source uses, the one attributed to the French writer Malraux.
It's a devastating comparison.
Yep.
Malraux was supposedly asked, "You write such beautiful things, but who will live them?" And his alleged response was, "We think, my slaves, What are they for if not to live it?
Wow, that creates an immediate and very ugly hierarchy. Thought for the elite, action for the masses.
And the source warns that if you adopt that mindset even accidentally, you risk Christianizing the religion, not in theology but in structure. You create specialized castes.
This person's job is to think, this one's job is to write, this one's job is to do the physical work.
You lose the holistic model completely. The prophetic example was one person who was the greatest thinker and the greatest doer, all at once.
Okay, so that's the first distortion. An over-reliance on speech without context, leading to a kind of fragmented top-down religion. But the second model seems to be a complete overcorrection in the other direction.
A complete swing of the pendulum. Now we move to the second model, the Muhammad of the mystics or the Sufis.
And if the first was the prophet of speech, this one is
The prophet of emotion and of objects.
emotion and objects. So we're moving from the purely intellectual to the purely ethereal.
That's a good way to put it. This model emphasizes intense feeling, the symbolic parts of his life, the mutashabihat. It often relies on stories that are, let's say, not well substantiated.
And how is he depicted here?
As someone almost detached from the world, eyes fixed on the sky, uninterested in earthly matters, sort of, ruling the cosmos with a subtle gesture of his hand. His political and social mission becomes almost an allegory.
And the source says they do this by selecting very specific anecdotes with a tweezer, pulling out only the most emotionally charged details.
Exactly. And the prime example of this is the story of the Hijra, the migration to Medina.
The story of the cave. Everyone knows this one.
Right. And what detail is always emphasized, the prophet plugging a snake hole with his foot to protect Abu Bakr, or Abu Bakr's tears of fear and love falling on the prophet's face. These are incredibly moving details of loyalty.
But I can see the problem. If you only focus on the snake and the tears, you miss the bigger picture.
You miss the entire point. The source argues that focusing on that one emotional detail completely obscures the reality that the Hijra was a march towards establishing a state. It was a political, organized, strategic act of nation building.
Not just an emotional escape.
But focusing on the snake hole, you turn a political revolution into a sentimental story. And that encourages a passive faith.
And this passivity is reinforced by making him seem, well, superhuman, impossible to imitate.
This is where the critique gets very, very sharp. The lecture points to specific physical descriptions used in these traditions, often from works like Al-Qasais al-Kubra, that are almost designed to make him inimitable.
Okay, let's go through them. What are some of these traits?
Well, things like he was always naturally taller than anyone else he stood next to.
Okay.
His voice was naturally louder than anyone else's. He had the sexual strength of 40 men.
Wow.
And it gets more physiological. The belief that his bodily waste was pure, tahir, or that his sweat naturally smelled of musk and amber.
Right. So the source's question then becomes obvious. If he's the example to be followed, how on earth can a normal human being imitate any of that?
You can't. The source asks directly, is this the Muhammad I am meant to follow? Must my sweat smell like perfume? It concludes that this isn't a description of a human being, it's a description of an angel.
An angel to be revered from a distance, but not a human to be emulated in your daily life.
And that's the consequence. It creates a profound passivity. The mindset becomes, well, they were like that and we are like this. We'll just do our best. It's an excuse to stop striving.
And that's when the focus shifts to objects, to relics.
Precisely. If you can't imitate his jihad, his courage, his institution building, well, it's a lot easier to focus on his cloak, a strand of his hair, his sandal, or a footprint. The symbol replaces the struggle.
So you end up with what the source calls a Dencezes Bertip, an imbalanced figure.
A completely imbalanced character, always crying, but never angry at injustice, always caressing, but never warning against oppression. It's a very passive, one-dimensional figure who could never have led a revolution.
So we have two extremes. The traditionalist model, all speech and rules, and the mystic model, all emotion and supernaturalism. Both, in their own way, make the prophet inaccessible.
And that's where we have to turn to the third model, the true model, the Muhammad of the Quran.
The model that's meant to synthesize these fragmented parts back into a whole human being.
And the Quran starts by defining him not by his speech or his emotions, but by his core mission. We have not sent you, O Muhammad, except as a mercy to all the worlds. Rahmah.
That's his fundamental identity. And yet, the source says we have committed a betrayal of this trust, this amana. That's a strong word, betrayal.
It's a very strong accusation. The The prophet's life is the greatest trust given to the community, and we betray it by misrepresenting him, by walling him off from our daily lives, and by turning him into this unreachable historical artifact.
The metaphors the lecturer uses here they're really searing.
They are. It says we're like an idiot sitting on a treasure starving to death. We have the blueprint for spiritual wealth, but we're living in poverty.
And the one about the antique pocket watch?
That we treat him like a grandfather's silver watch. We take it out once a year on a special occasion. Maybe we weep over it, admire it, and then we put it right back in its velvet box. And it has no bearing on how we tell time today.
We trap him in the past.
We trap him in his grave and visit it to cry, instead of bringing his example to life in our homes and our societies.
Okay, this brings us to a really fascinating theological point the source makes. It says the Quran commands us to follow Muhammad, not Allah, and not even the Quran itself. Why is that?
It's based on a fundamental principle of logic, the principle of genus, or nature. For an example to be effective, it has to be of the same kind, the same sins, as the one doing the imitating.
So a wall can be an example for another wall.
But not for a person. The categories are wrong. And applying that to the divine, God is, by definition, of a different nature from us. He is the creator. We are created. You can't imitate God in that direct behavioral way.
In the Quran, it's a book.
It's a book. It's divine text.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have a heart. It doesn't grieve. It doesn't get angry or forgive. It doesn't struggle. You can't hold up a book as a direct behavioral model for a human who does all of those things.
So the conclusion is, you need a human.
You absolutely need a human who loves, grieves, forgives, fights, and reconciles to be a functional, living example for other humans who face the exact same struggles.
And this is why he's the necessary intermediary for love of God. The verse, say, if you love Allah, then follow me.
Allah will love you and forgive you your sins. Following Muhammad is, as the source puts it, the fatura.
The invoice.
The cost. The cost of claiming to love God. The source says love without this payment is fraud in love. It's like writing a worthless check. You claim to have the funds, but you don't make the payment.
And it's a two-way transaction.
It's a beautiful reciprocity. If the believer pays the price of love, which is imitation, then God pays the price of his love, which is to love them back and grant them forgiveness.
This just reinforces that prophethood itself is an institution of exemplification.
Which is why we've had prophets in history without a book, but we've never had a major divine book sent down without a prophet to live it and embody it.
The living, walking Quran, which is exactly what Osha said.
Her famous perfect testimony. When they asked her to describe his character, she didn't give a list of adjectives. She just said his character was the Quran.
He didn't just follow it, he was it.
The source uses some brilliant metaphors for this. Think of the Quran as the divine raw material, like pollen or straw or grain.
Okay.
You put that raw material through the prophet machine. The pollen goes in, and what comes out is honey. The straw goes in, milk comes out. The grain goes in, eggs come out. The divine revelation goes in, and what comes out is life. A human being on 2 feet, a visible blueprint for how to live.
So what happens when a society loses that blueprint, when they ignore or distort that living example?
It creates a vacuum, a huge spiritual vacuum. And nature and society abhors a vacuum.
And that vacuum gets filled.
Inevitably.
Yeah.
It gets filled by false prophets, by Satakar, pay gambler, who rise up to fill the void and deceive the people.
The source gives specific examples of this, doesn't it?
It does. It points to Baha'u'llah in Iran, Ghulam Muhammad Qadiani in Pakistan, Rishat Halif in America, Iskender El Ekber in Turkey. It argues that these figures aren't just random occurrences. They are the direct symptom of a community that has lost its grip on the real, authentic prophet.
And the only cure for this flood of counterfeits
Is to know and revive the real thing, to pull him out of the museum and put him back into our daily actionable lives.
To do that, we have to understand how he was built, how he was trained. This takes us back to the very beginning, to his training and the crucial concept of Rab.
Exactly. The prophet's training in the concept of Rab, the very first phase of his mission wasn't public. It was an internal journey.
The retreat to the cave of Hira.
God sent him there first, not to preach, but for a quest of self-knowledge. He was grappling with that deep existential pain, the Sansenia, asking, who am I? Where did I come from? Where am I going?
And the very first word of the revelation was the answer. Read, in the name of your Rab.
And that word, Rab, is the key. This is where the source makes a crucial distinction. The polytheists in Mecca, they already knew Allah.
Right, they weren't atheists. They acknowledged a creator, God.
They'd admit Allah created the heavens and the earth, sent the rain.
Yeah.
Their mistake wasn't in denying a high God. It was in neglecting the concept of Rab.
Which means what exactly? Lord, sustainer.
All of that. But crucially, it means the one who governs, the one who has sovereignty and authority over your daily life. They accepted Allah in the heavens, but on earth they had other Rabs, the tribal elders, the market forces, their own desires. They worshipped idols as intermediaries to get closer to Allah, but in doing so, they denied his direct moment-to-moment rule over their lives.
So it was a political challenge as much as a theological one?
It was a direct challenge to the sovereignty of the Quraysh elite. Think of Pharaoh in the Quran. He never claimed to be Allah, a creator god. He claimed to be the greatest Rab, the ultimate ruler and master of the people's lives.
And the source provides actual data to back this up.
The statistical proof is fascinating. In the first 30 chapters revealed in Mecca, the word Rab is used 80 times. The word Allah is used only 20 times.
The 4-to-1 ratio.
That's not an accident. It was a deliberate linguistic strategy to correct this fundamental error, to reestablish God's sovereignty not just in the sky, but on the streets, in the market, in the home.
So the lesson of Hira isn't to go find a physical cave.
The lesson is to turn every night into a Hira, a time for that deep internal self-questioning. Who is the Rab of my life right now? Is it my boss? My bank account? My ego? Or is it God?
And the Prophet made sure this was an ongoing practice, not a one-time event.
Through Atikaf, the spiritual retreat he did for 10 days every single year, it was a built-in mechanism to ensure the community never lost that internal connection, that they always went back to that foundational Hira experience.
And once that internal foundation was set, he moved immediately to the external, to building the community.
Which brings us to the example in action, discipline and balance. After Hira, the first thing he established was the Darul Arqam Institute, and it was known as the Man-Making Institute.
That phrasing is so important. Not teaching rules or cultivating flowers, but making humans.
Forging integrated, disciplined people who could carry this revolutionary message. And you see the results in the early companions. Take Abu Zar al-Ghifari.
He was from a tribe known for, well, for being bandits, right?
The Ghifar tribe were highway robbers. He came to the Prophet as a rogue,
Yeah.
just a tinky, and he left as a saint, Veli. That's the power of the transformation.
But the stories also showed just how intense the discipline of that early community was.
The level of organizational secrecy is just astounding. When Abu Zar came to Mecca, there were maybe 200 Muslims in a town of thousands, and he searched for the Prophet for an entire month and couldn't find him.
An entire month. Nobody talked. Nobody broke rank.
Think about that. The trust and discipline it requires is immense. And when he finally connects with Ali, who was just a boy,
Yeah.
he's given these secret instructions on how to get into the meeting.
To follow at a distance, and Ali would pretend to fix his shoe at the door as a signal.
The fact that a 9-year-old could execute that kind of operational security tells you everything about the level of training they were receiving.
And this training completely rewired their priorities. The story of Abu Bakr after being beaten.
It's incredible. He's beaten unconscious, severely injured. And when he wakes up, his first words aren't about his pain or his family. His first question is, where is my beloved Muhammad?
His primary concern was the source of his new life, not the pain of his body.
That's the measure of the education they received. And it's all built on a foundation of balance. The balance between their inner life and their outer struggle.
The day and the night.
The Prophet was the hero of the night, deep in prayer, crying with such intensity that he would wet the mat beneath him. And when asked why, since his sins were already forgiven, he'd say, should I not be a greatly thankful servant?
And that nighttime devotion fueled his daytime action.
It had to. He was the witness and mujahid of the day. During his time in Medina, he was engaged in some form of jihad act of struggle or warfare roughly every 40 days. This was not a passive life.
But it was a balanced life. He knew how to prioritize, especially with this concept of the jihad al-akbar, the greater struggle.
And he tailored that concept to the individual. He was a master spiritual trainer.
Give us the examples.
Okay, so a commander wants to stay back from a campaign to get the merit of praying Friday prayers behind the Prophet, a very pious intention. But the Prophet tells him, one step taken in the way of Allah is better than 1,000 Jumu'ah prayers behind me. Action over ritual in that context.
But then you have the opposite case, the man who wants to go to war because it's profitable, but his parents are old and neglected.
And to him, the Prophet says, go serve your mother and father. That is your battlefield. This reveals the principle.
The greater jihad is whatever is hardest for you personally, whatever your ego is trying to flee from.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If going to war is easy for you, but waking up for the dawn prayer is hard, then Fajr is your greater jihad. If giving charity is easy, but speaking truth to power is hard, that's your greater jihad. It's a customized spiritual path.
And that same sense of balance extended to his own temperament, his own emotions.
Which brings us to the balance of temperament and mercy. And here the contrast is just stunning.
Let's start with the confrontation with Abu Jahl, the great enemy in Mecca.
Okay, so Abu Jahl is insulting the Prophet personally, right near the Kaaba. And the Prophet is just silent. He's patient. He absorbs the personal attack on his own honor.
But then Abu Jahl makes a mistake.
He switches from insulting the man to insulting God, and in that instant, the Prophet transforms. The source says he became a tiger. Kaplan Kasiltmi. He walked slowly towards Abu Jahl, put his finger right up to his eye and said, "I was sent to crush people like you." And Abu Jahl, the tyrant, just shrinks back in fear. He was utterly fearless when defending God, but completely patient when defending himself.
And the source points out that we tend to do the exact opposite.
We do the exact opposite. We become tigers when someone insults us, cuts us off in traffic, questions our status. But when God or his principles are mocked, we become snails. We shrink away.
Yet this righteous fury was paired with the most incredible mercy.
Even in his moment of greatest physical pain. At the Battle of Uhud, his face is bleeding, his teeth are broken, the battle is a disaster. And his companions, in their anguish, say, "Curse them, pray against them."
And he raises his hands?
Not to curse, but to pray for them. Allah, guide them, for they do not know. He saw their root problem as ignorance, not pure evil. That is the definition of mercy to all the worlds.
And even in the aftermath of that failure, a failure caused by his own followers.
God commands him to be gentle with them. The verse comes down, "Had you been harsh and hard-hearted, they would have dispersed from you." He's told to keep consulting them, to forgive them, to pray for their forgiveness, even though they had just cost him dearly.
That's a level of leadership that's almost unimaginable.
It's leadership that absorbs the failures of the team without becoming a tyrant. That is true, Rama.
This all leads to the ultimate point, really, that his life itself was the message.
That's the core of it. The power of life is the message. Tebli. His method of invitation wasn't based on sermons. It was based on his lived example.
And the story of Sumame bin Uzal is the perfect case study.
It is. Sumame was a king, an enemy who had threatened to kill the Prophet. He gets captured and is tied to a pillar in the mosque in Medina.
So he's a prisoner of war.
Yes, but he's treated with dignity. He's fed well. And for 3 days, he does nothing but observe. He watches the Prophet's prayers at night. He watches his interactions with the poor, his justice, his gentleness, his daily routine.
And the Prophet doesn't preach at him, no long arguments or debates.
Nothing, just a simple greeting and a simple invitation each day. The source says he avoided words and nonsense. The Prophet's life was the sermon.
And on the 3rd day, he's just released.
Ordered released, no conditions. Sumame walks away, goes to the edge of town, washes himself, and walks straight back into the mosque to accept Islam.
And what he says is amazing.
He says that 3 days ago, the Prophet's face was the most hated face on earth to him. But after observing him for 3 days, it was now the most beloved face on earth.
He was converted by the deed, not the speech.
He was struck by the essence, not the word. His conversion was a reaction to witnessing a truly integrated, beautiful human life. And it changed him instantly.
And this story is a direct challenge to us, isn't it?
It's a mirror. The source asks us directly, if your neighbors, your colleagues, your modern-day sumameller, if they aren't being drawn to your faith, you have to stop and examine how you are living, not just what you're saying. Our lives are meant to be the invitation.
This all culminates in the final vision, the goal of this entire process.
The goal is conclusion. The integrated human, muwahid. The authentic prophetic model is one that successfully integrates the 3 core faculties of a human being.
The triple balance.
Uric, the heart, our emotions. Kafa, the head, our intellect. And bilik, the wrist, our action and power.
And the source critiques the modern Muslim for living a completely fragmented life.
A life of compartments. He says the modern person says, I'm a Muslim in my heart, I'm secular in my mind, and I'm worldly in my actions. My heart is for the afterlife. My body is for this world. I look for my lost keys while I'm in the middle of my prayer.
It's the tragedy of the fragmented self.
And you cannot build a unified community, Vadet, out of fragmented individuals. Unity of the self, tawhid of the self has to come first.
So the final synthesis is a call to action. to reject the two false models.
Reject the purely emotional Muhammad of the mystics and the purely verbal Muhammad of the traditionalists.
And embrace the Quranic Muhammad, the one whose
Night is for worship, whose day is for struggle and service, and whose evening is for thought and study with the book.
And the final demand is to unify the symbols of these three things in one body.
To unify the book, thought, the prayer beads, worship, and the weapon, action and struggle. Not literally, but symbolically. To be a person of intellect, devotion, and effective action, all at the same time in one integrated personality.
It's an incredible challenge. It's in moving beyond just admiring him to actively, consciously trying to rebuild his model within ourselves.
That's the whole project. To internalize this holistic model and achieve that integration in our own lives.
And the source leaves us with one final provocative thought that I think is the perfect place to end. The measure of our success as a community is when we can align our lives with this example to such an extent that
It's saying, I have become Muslim will mean I have become happy, mutlu oldham.
that happiness, that contentment becomes the proof of the faith.
It's the ultimate outcome of becoming a muwahid, a unified human. It proves that the mercy sent to the worlds wasn't just a historical event. If his living presence was a mercy, his example must continue to be a mercy today. Otherwise, he's just another great figure trapped in a history book.
A profound challenge to carry with us. The life we live is the invoice for the love we claim. We hope this deep dive has provided some clarity on how to begin reading that invoice correctly. Thank you for joining us.